Can a grumpy old man be changed by the childhood spirit?
Granddad?
A granddaughter he didn't know he had?
Whatever she needs, I haven't got it.
A mischievous little terror?
I can't cope.
A little treasure?
She's a smashing kid.
And I don't have to eat vegetables.
She's good fun. Nothing remotely healthy need pass your lips. She makes me feel young again.
John Thor stars in Buried Treasure, Sunday at 8 on ITV1.
And just starting on ITV2, Rich and Famous, Uncut. Here in 30 minutes, Lily Live. First, the ITV Weekend News.
New alert as Anthrax hits New York office. Allied air attacks, now a shift in targets. Refugees flee Kabul with stories of the bombing. And footballer strike moves a step closer tonight.
From ITN, the ITV Weekend News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. America, still reeling from the shock of the terrorist attacks, is gripped by a new fear tonight after a fourth case of anthrax was discovered, this time in New York City. A woman at NBC television has tested positive to the deadly disease, which has already killed one journalist in Florida and affected 2 others. And suspect packages were moved from the offices of the New York Times building tonight. So far, there's nothing to link the cases to terrorism. One theory is that someone with a grudge could be targeting news organisations. James Mates has the latest.
As if the city of New York hasn't suffered enough, suddenly today the anthrax scare that is sweeping this country turned up on its doorstep. The deadly bacteria has been traced to the Rockefeller Center, another New York landmark. It is home to the American TV network NBC. In news flashes today, they had to announce that one of their own had become a victim.
What we are reporting this hour, that an NBC employee in New York City has been tested positive for anthrax.
As the news raced across the city's ticker tape, the mayor tried to reassure the population this was just an isolated case.
It is likely that this issue all began way back on September 25th. So one piece of good news is that if anyone else was going to be infected, it would have happened by now. If this were some kind of a case that was going to have large implications, or at least we're hopeful of that.
President Bush has been trying to persuade Americans to live as normal a life as possible amid the traumas of the last month, but this isn't making it easy.
It has got to cause concern for our nation. But I want everybody in the country to know we're responding rapidly. First of all, the person that is feeling fine. She's doing well. The American people need to go about their lives. We cannot let the terrorists lock our country down.
And the FBI are trying to calm the panic in Florida, where one employee at a newspaper office has died from anthrax and 2 more been infected. All other workers now have been cleared, and one of the victims even is back at work.
I went to work today, and I'm taking the medication like everybody else, and I'm doing good.
But now another suspicious letter has been received at the headquarters of the New York Times. The building's been declared safe, but a white powdery substance is still being tested. The administration and the police are struggling on the one hand to contain these outbreaks and warn people of the dangers, while on the other not igniting the sort of panic that will play into the terrorists' hands. It's a very difficult balance, perhaps even an impossible one, and they admit they haven't achieved it yet. James Mates, ITN, Washington.
So what does this latest case tell us about anthrax, and what makes it such a lethal choice for terrorists, or indeed someone with a grudge? Well, our science editor Lawrence McGinty explains.
Faced with what appears to be a second attack with the anthrax bacterium, Americans are rapidly realizing how deadly this organism can be. The man who died in Florida was infected through the most dangerous route of entry, into the lungs. The New York case seems to be skin anthrax, which is much less serious. There are in fact 3 kinds of anthrax infection. Skin anthrax is when spores get into a cut. It kills only 1% of those infected if treated. Ingestion anthrax is caused by eating infected material and kills almost everyone, even with antibiotics. Pulmonary anthrax develops after breathing in spores. Again, almost every patient dies.
treatment for the skin variety of anthrax is actually much better than the inhalational form, because the inhalational form doesn't leave as much of a trail, if you like, and so someone is going to be really quite ill perhaps before they're picked up.
By the time anthrax is identified in the laboratory, it's usually too late for successful treatment of people who've breathed it in. But the bacteria that causes anthrax isn't contagious. It doesn't spread from person to person. And it's not easy to spread anthrax spores, so people breathe them in. Those two facts make mass attacks with anthrax unlikely. It's more the weapon of a lone attacker than a terrorist. Lawrence McGinty, ITN.
So back to James Mates in Washington. Now, James, it's clearly a country already in a state of some nervousness after September the 11th. We seem to have lost James Mates, I'm afraid. We'll try and return to him a little bit later in the programme. In the meantime, with the bombing on Afghanistan set to continue, American military chiefs indicated an apparent change in tactics today after releasing more evidence of what they said were successful strikes against missile sites and airfields. The US Defense Secretary revealed they're now going after soldiers on the ground. With the latest, here's Robert Moore.
The RAF have been active in the skies over the Arabian Sea, not in bombing runs, but in flying VC-10 refueling tankers, providing vital support for US strike aircraft. So far, Britain is the only nation to have given visible military assistance to the Americans after this first week of attacks on Afghanistan. There has been a reduction in the bombing today in recognition that this is a day of prayer in the Muslim world. But reconnaissance flights have continued, and the Pentagon has made clear that any emerging targets identified as valuable are still being attacked. The US Defense Secretary confirmed that barracks and troops are also now being bombed.
The United States is seeking out concentrations of people who are involved in these terrorist activities and in the terrorist training camps and in the terrorist network. And when we find them, we do try to deal with them. People should be on notice that it is not trees or rocks that cause terrorism, it's people.
The Pentagon also released new video, so-called gun camera film, showing the destruction of targets. That was Kabul airport. And these were explosions at an airfield in Herat. A large transport plane is being targeted here in the middle of the picture. But the Arab television station Al Jazeera, filming inside Kabul, says these pictures are of Afghan children who are caught up in the attacks. The Taliban regime have also said there are mounting civilian casualties, although it's a claim impossible to confirm. This doctor said he condemned the terrorist attacks on America, but also now condemned the current US attacks on Afghanistan. From the White House, President Bush said he was willing to halt the attacks if all the suspected terrorists were handed over.
Actually, I will say it again. If you cough him up and his people today, that we reconsider what we're doing to your country. You still have a second chance. Just bring him in. And bring his leaders and lieutenants and other thugs and criminals with him.
But even as that offer was made, the Pentagon announced it did not expect the Taliban to surrender bin Laden, and military operations are continuing. On the key question of whether air missions will next week be followed by the deployment of troops on the ground, there is no word. Not surprisingly, all future military operations are being cloaked in secrecy. Robert Moore, ITN.
So changing tactics for the military in Afghanistan. Well, now let's return to the anthrax story and back to James Mates in Washington. Now, James, clearly it's a country already in a state of some nervousness following September the 11th. But how is this latest threat affecting the people there?
Well, you know, really is the last thing they need here. People were just beginning to fly again, just beginning to go out shopping and spend money again. And the economy desperately needs that. Figures today show that consumer spending has dropped dramatically here since September the 11th. And now this, of course, threatens to set them right back again.
A lot of reassurances, of course, from the mayor, Giuliani, and others. How effective are they proving to be?
Well, they're doing their best they can. They keep emphasizing that they are not linking the Florida attacks with the New York attacks, although they're treating them both as criminal investigations there. They keep emphasizing that one person can't give anthrax to another, that antibiotics can work. But the trouble is, anthrax, the very name of anthrax, is one of those biological agents that just its name strikes fear into people, and it's certainly having that effect here.
James Mates in Washington, thank you. Well, as the bombing continues on Afghanistan, our correspondent Julian Mannion is inside the country with the anti-Taliban forces. Today, he travelled along the front line between the town of Jabal as-Siraj in Northern Alliance territory, past the airbase at Bagram and onto the villages at Kapisa, about 25 miles from Kabul. There, he met refugees fleeing the capital. This is his report.
The refugees fleeing Kabul face an arduous journey. The 19 people packed in this ancient jeep had to walk for 2 hours around the Taliban lines before they could find a vehicle to take them to Northern Alliance territory. On the way, they had to drive through a no-man's land infested with bandits where many of the refugees are robbed. These people told me that Kabul, under the bombing, is now a city of fear. People stay awake all night, this man told me. They can't get to sleep till morning because they're so afraid. Another man told me that people are fearful of the Taliban.
Last night the Americans bombed a military base and the Taliban started to arrest people living in that area. Many people are running away to escape from the Taliban.
Not far away, Northern Alliance troops are firing on the Taliban and receiving bursts of machine gun fire in return. Every night there are clashes, but the Americans have yet to bomb the Taliban troops guarding the road to Kabul. And without that bombing, the Northern Alliance cannot advance. In northwest Afghanistan, the alliance is said to be making some gains. They're claiming hundreds of defections from the Taliban ranks, and they're trying to cut the roads which link Taliban troops in the north with their headquarters in Kabul. The alliance is trying to make an impression, but it's having to follow a script written in Washington. The Americans now want a political solution as well as a military one, and it seems that they won't allow the alliance to march on Kabul until it's reached agreement with other opposition groups on a coalition government to replace the Taliban. This strange war to administer justice in Afghanistan now looks set to last months, if not years. And like it or not, London and Washington are now having to include in their plans the question of how to restore peace and stability to this war-torn land. Julian Mannion, ITN, in Northern Alliance territory near Kabul.
Today saw the most violent anti-bombing protests so far as thousands of anti-American demonstrators took to the streets in Muslim countries around the world. Most affected was Pakistan, where pro-Taliban protesters attacked police stations, shops and cinemas. The security forces fought back with batons and tear gas and fired live ammunition into the air. From Pakistan, here's Bill Neely.
This was a Muslim holy day, but there was no pause in the bombing or the protests. Today was billed as a big test of strength for Pakistan's government. It passed it with brute force and bullets. The police had orders to fire live ammunition, and they did. The stakes are huge, the very survival of Pakistan and of its military regime. So with tear gas and terror, these protests in Karachi were crushed. There was damage and debris, but compared to what could have happened in a city of 12 million people next to a war zone, this was some kind of victory. It was the same across the country. The anti-American threats are wild.
America will be broken into pieces, just like Russia, which was also a superpower.
The reality of controlling the extremists more basic.
I'll give him a good beating, sir. I don't mind being quoted. I'll give him a good beating.
Either way, the situation here and in Afghanistan is combustible.
This is a big conflict. This will become in the shape of Third World War.
Third World War?
Well, yeah.
For the most part, and for now, the crackdown on these militants has worked. But the coalition is promising a long war. Millions are being mobilized in Pakistan to join these protests. thousands to join the war. Everyone agrees this is only the beginning. Extremists groom a new generation for what they call holy war. We are all ready to fight, says the sign. Pakistan is twitchy. It supports the hunt for terrorists in Afghanistan, but it winces at the killing of civilians. It now has hundreds of American troops on its soil, as well as masses of pro-Taliban extremists. But today, at least, it had the extremists on the run. Bill Neely, ITN, Islamabad.
Growing protests in Pakistan. Still ahead on the ITV Weekend News, some aid arrives tonight for the refugees. Minister speaks out at last over that leaked memo. And could football be blacked out next week? That's all after the break.
Cheddar, this historic city of cheese, is about to become a cyber city. When I push this button, the Cheddar website will open the markets of the world to us. What's happened?
We've been hacked. Web security? IBM can help.
Hello, Mrs. Lowe.
That's right.
Hi, we've got your new TV. Right, Nigel.
Well, it is Sunday afternoon.
At Curry's, we deliver 7 days a week, even on a Sunday. With no worries, low prices too. Like this Panasonic pure flat screen TV for under £700.
Should we take the old thing away?
No, let him sleep.
Curry's, no worries.
At B&Q, we're clearing selected kitchens to make way for new ranges. This salsa kitchen is now half price. We've experts that will help you plan it for free and can arrange our guaranteed fitting service if you'd like. We can even help you pay for it with a credit option that suits you. And best of all, if you order by the 21st of October, we'll have it installed for Christmas. You can do it when you B&Q it.
Imagine if you could play Monopoly for real money. Well, now you can. With the new Monopoly Instant Scratch card from the National Lottery, you can win up to £10,000. Anyone can win on Monopoly in an instant.
Everyone loves famous name brands, but their high prices can often break your heart. At the new Royal Keys Outlet Centre, famous brands are always a bargain. You'll adore saving up to 50% off the recommended retail prices. And you'll find savings everywhere you look, with even more new stores opening soon. Brands you love at prices you'll adore at the new Royal Keys.
The new Royal Keys Outlet Centre, next to the International Ferry Terminal, North Shields.
Welcome back. Now, we heard earlier from refugees about the conditions they face inside Afghanistan. Well, today the effort to get more food aid to the country before the onset of winter was given greater urgency. The International Development Secretary, Claire Short, donated an extra £15 million to help and called the situation a race against time to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. Kevin Dunn has that story.
A plane carrying 40 tons of aid for Afghanistan has arrived in neighbouring Uzbekistan. It is part of a UN build-up planned before military action began to help millions of Afghans survive the winter.
We are building up stocks of supplies and human resources in order to be able to provide emergency assistance to people in Afghanistan as and when it becomes possible.
Inside Afghanistan, a quarter of the population is said to be hungry. Decades of war and 3 years of drought have left many facing famine. Some convoys of food aid have resumed, but aid agencies say much more is needed in the 6 weeks before winter closes in. Britain today pledged an extra £15 million in emergency aid.
The people of Afghanistan are facing the risk of famine conditions. We are racing against time to truck massive quantities of food and other emergency supplies into the country before the snows make large-scale trucking hazardous.
There is a burgeoning crisis too in Pakistan, which is already home to 2 million Afghan refugees. Hundreds more are seeking shelter there from hunger and war. In Washington, President Bush asked every American child to donate $1 to help the children of Afghanistan.
I hope American children in their classrooms and families in their homes put $1 in an envelope and send it to America's Fund for Afghan Children.
3, 2, 1, green light.
American aircraft have been dropping food parcels by the thousand, but aid agencies say much more is needed if a humanitarian disaster is to be avoided. Kevin Dunn, ITN.
To other news now, and the Transport Secretary finally broke his silence today to answer criticism that he should have sacked his special advisor, Joe Moore. Stephen Byers said Ms Moore admitted a terrible error of judgment in urging colleagues to bury bad news on the day of the American attacks. He said she's now been disciplined and implied that's the end of the matter. From Westminster, here's John Ray.
It's now Stephen Byers' reputation that's at stake, not just the judgment of the spin doctor, whose advice has been condemned as at best insensitive and at worst deeply cynical. For 3 days he tried to weather the storm. Today, under growing pressure, he went public and defended his decision to keep his closest ally.
Joe Moore did not offer me her resignation. It may well have been in her mind, but she didn't offer me her resignation. What she did do was to recognise that it was a terrible error of judgment. She's apologised, accepted responsibility, and she's also been subject to the official disciplinary procedures in the department, and as a result of that, has received an official warning about her future conduct.
And there they'll both hope the matter will rest, though around Whitehall there's still much ill feeling in a row given extra bite by accusations she tried to run a personal campaign against this man, Bob Kiley, head of London Transport and opponent of government plans for the Tube. The senior civil servant who refused to play along was switched to another job.
We did brief that his policies were ones which we felt were inappropriate, but that was because we were rebutting arguments that were being put forward by Bob Kiley, which I think is wholly appropriate. But we were not attacking Bob Kiley at a personal level.
But a number of Labour MPs remain furious Mr Byers hasn't sacked Joe Moore, and tonight one senior backbencher went further still.
Ideally, she should offer her resignation. If she doesn't do that, the Secretary of State should dismiss her. If he's not prepared to do that, the Prime Minister should ask for his resignation. It's as serious as that.
So far, Downing Street's support for Stephen Byers and Joe Moore has been firm, if hardly enthusiastic. And with MPs returning to the Commons next week, the government will not look kindly on any fresh revelations. John Ray, ITN Westminster.
This year's Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to the United Nations and its Secretary-General, Kofi Annan. Mr Annan, who spent most of his life working for the UN, said it was a great encouragement for him and his colleagues at a difficult time. Both he and the UN were praised for their efforts to create peace and remove conflict in the post-Cold War era. The ceasefires of 2 loyalist paramilitary groups were declared over tonight. The Northern Ireland Secretary, John Reid, said the UDA and the LBF had repeatedly broken the truce with a series of violent incidents, which continued again last night. It means that some prisoners released early under the Good Friday Agreement could now be sent back to jail. Here's Mark Webster.
Tonight, the security forces were out as usual in case of a loyalist backlash. But there were only minor disturbances. Earlier, the Secretary of State had made it plain his patience had run out with what he called loyalist thugs.
I can't pretend to you that specifying these organisations will change their behaviour or soften their vicious hatred or change their warped view of reality. They may lash out, they may flaunt their contempt for the law, but there is a limit to society's tolerance, and that limit has now been reached.
These were the scenes of violence last night, which finally prompted a move against loyalist groups. Hundreds of youths pelted the security forces with stones and petrol bombs in clashes which the police said were clearly orchestrated by loyalist paramilitaries. There's no doubt the government was reluctant to take this decision, above all because it means that the largest loyalist paramilitary group here no longer has even nominal contact on the peace process. The next stage is likely to be the rearrest of at least some of the 200 UDA men who were released early from prison under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. And while for now here it is relatively peaceful, that in the future could mean even worse unrest on the streets. Mark Webster, ITN, Belfast.
A man who carried out a 12-year hate mail campaign against his neighbours was jailed for 4 months today. James Forster was found guilty earlier this year of sending obscene letters and posters to other residents of the North Yorkshire village of Manfield. The judge at Teesside Crown Court said Forster's actions had been cunning and cruel. Football now, and the prospect of all the country's top footballers going on strike looks increasingly likely tonight. The Players' Union wants more than £10 million a year for the television rights, but the Premier League has kicked that figure into touch. If no deal's agreed soon, then players will vote on strike action next week. Graham Miller explains.
It's football played in front of the television cameras that's at risk. The Players' Union say unless the Premier League offer more than £10 million a year, and providing the players agree, footballers will be told not to take part in TV games. Significantly, the union claimed full backing today from Manchester United's squad. The Premier League say they don't want a strike, but if forced, would turn to the High Court.
So what we want to see is enough money released to do the things that actually are needed to be done, the things that are right and to be done. So I think there's an awful lot more room and scope for negotiations and discussions yet, and hopefully in the next few days we'll be able to get back around the table and hammer that sort of agreement out.
The union's ballot papers will now be delivered early next week, asking the question, would you be prepared to strike in televised games from November the 23rd? The answer appears to be yes.
The feeling I'm getting back from most of the players that I've spoken to about it is that, you know, like I said, it's our union, and if they feel that's the course of action we need to take, then that's the course of action we will take.
They will not drive a wedge between players, and I can assure them they will not be able to take advantage of this situation by sacking any of our members. They are not allowed to under employment law.
The union says the latest offer's derisory. It's not enough to look after players' welfare commitments. So goals and strikes will both be high on tomorrow's league programme agenda. Graham Miller, ITN Sport.
Tonight's headlines: there's a new health alert in America after a 4th case of anthrax was discovered, this time in New York. And American military chiefs have indicated a change in tactics today, saying they now intend to go after soldiers on the ground. And that's it for now. I'm back with news bulletins throughout the weekend, but in the meantime, from all the team here, goodbye.
The regional news and weather here tonight at 11:25.
Powergen, gas, electricity and telephone.
Good evening. Fairly warm for some of us today, plenty of sunshine, very pleasant indeed. I think a bit of an Indian summer really, and that's probably how it's going to be for some of us for tomorrow as well. On the other hand, for the rest of us, I think we're more likely to witness the weather that we're more likely to see on a typically British summer's day, certainly more longer spells of rain with that. So moving on to tonight, drizzle for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and Cumbria for the rest of us, so largely dry through the night. We're going to have mist and fog developing though through the course of the night, could actually be quite dense in some places. Temperatures though shouldn't really cause too much of a stir. A mild night ahead. We're looking at lows of 8 Celsius. So tomorrow morning, that mist and fog still lingering across the south. The good news is it will eventually start to fizzle out through the course of the morning. Certainly more sunshine coming in behind that, not as much as we've had today. 1 or 2 isolated scattered showers, in particular across the far southwest of the country. So temperatures then, well, I think the best of the temperatures are going to be across England and Wales. 21 is the highest, that's 70 in Fahrenheit. The further north you go, certainly breezy. We've got those very tightly packed isobars there, averaging out 14 up to 17, so still just about climbing up into the 60s. So looking ahead over the next few days, Sunday, fair bit of sunshine, very heavy downpours though across parts of Scotland, certainly quite breezy. Temperatures just really dropping back a touch as well. For Monday, the start of next week, still going to have a fair bit of sunshine, but a big band of rain coming in from the Atlantic across Northern Ireland and Scotland as well, bringing very windy and rainy conditions with that as well. For now, though, here's the weather summary.
Powergen. Gas, electricity and telephone.
Controversial, confrontational, quintessential. For 25 years, the South Bank Show has mapped the cultural life of the UK. To celebrate, we take a look back at the programme that's taken presentation of the arts to a new level. The South Bank Show 25, Sunday 10:55, ITV1.